What if I told you that a single letter, lost for centuries, held the power to change the course of history forever? A letter that, once discovered, would unravel an empire, spark a revolution, and redraw the map of the world. This isn't a fantasy novel. It's the true story of how one British event, fueled by desperation and desire, reshaped our modern world. Our story begins in the early 16th century. England is a kingdom on the edge. The air is thick with tension, not just from the usual political scheming, but from a deeply personal crisis brewing within the royal court. King Henry VIII, a man of immense power and ego, sits on the throne. He is young, charismatic, but haunted by a singular obsession: securing his dynasty with a male heir. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, has failed to give him a son. After years of marriage, only a daughter, Mary, survives. For Henry, this isn't just a personal disappointment. It's a political catastrophe. Without a son, the Tudor line is fragile, and the bloody memory of the Wars of the Roses looms large. Amidst this anxiety, a new player enters the stage, Anne Boleyn. She isn't like the other ladies at court. She's intelligent, sharp-witted, and captivating. Henry is utterly infatuated, but Anne is different. She refuses to be his mistress. She wants to be his queen. This ambition ignites a fire in Henry. He sees a path forward, annul his marriage to Catra, marry Anne, and produce the son he so desperately craves. There's just one problem. A massive, insurmountable problem. The Pope. In the 16th century, the Catholic Church held absolute authority over marriage. An annulment, especially for a royal marriage as politically significant as Henry's, required the Pope's direct approval, and Pope Clement VII was in no position to grant it. He was effectively a prisoner of Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe. For the Pope, angering the emperor was unthinkable, so he stalled. For years, letters flew between England and Rome. Henry's frustration grew into a raging storm. He sent his best diplomats, offered bribes, made threats. Nothing worked. The Pope was a brick wall. The King of England, a man used to getting everything he wanted, was trapped. This is where our story takes its dramatic turn. The turning point wasn't a great battle or a sudden discovery. It was a radical, audacious idea, whispered into the king's ear by his clever advisors, men like Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cromwell. They proposed a solution that was, at the time, almost blasphemous. If the Pope will not grant you what you need, why do you need the Pope at all? What if the King of England, they argued, was not just the head of the state, but the head of the church in his own land? What if the ultimate authority didn't reside in Rome, but in the English crown itself? This was the spark, a dangerous, revolutionary idea. In 1534, fueled by his obsession for Anne and an heir, Henry made his move. He pushed a series of laws through Parliament, culminating in the Act of Supremacy. This single piece of legislation declared that the King of England was the supreme head of the Church of England. With a stroke of a pen, Henry severed 1,000 years of religious connection to Rome. He didn't just ask for an annulment, he dismantled the entire power structure that denied it to him. This was the moment everything changed. He was no longer begging the Pope for permission. He was taking power for himself. The English Reformation had begun. The impact was immediate and seismic. It was like an earthquake that shattered the foundations of English society. Henry quickly annulled his own marriage to Catherine, banished her from court, and married a pregnant Anne Boleyn. But this was just the beginning. The break with Rome unleashed forces Henry himself could not control. Monasteries, which had been centers of wealth, learning, and charity for centuries, were dissolved. Their vast lands and treasures were seized by the crown, fundamentally reshaping the English economy and landscape. Priceless libraries were destroyed, and centuries of art and culture vanished overnight. The religious identity of a nation was thrown into chaos. People who had been raised Catholic their entire lives were now told their faith was wrong. Those who refused to accept the king as the head of the church were branded traitors and executed. Great men, like Sir Thomas More, Henry's own friend and chancellor, went to the block for their conscience. It was a time of fear, rebellion, and profound change. The break with Rome didn't just affect England. It sent shockwaves across Europe. It emboldened Protestant reformers in other countries and deepened the religious divides that would plunge the continent into a century of brutal warfare. So, what is the legacy of this dramatic act born from a king's personal desires? It's all around us. The Church of England exists to this day. The break with Rome allowed England to forge its own path, creating a unique national identity that was distinct from mainland Europe. This independence arguably fueled its rise as a global naval and colonial power. The wealth seized from the monasteries funded Henry's new navy and empowered a new class of gentry, changing the social fabric of the nation forever. Politically, the power of Parliament grew as Henry needed its support to enact his religious revolution. This laid the groundwork for the constitutional monarchy we see in Britain today. And what about that lost letter I mentioned at the start? Well, while there wasn't one single letter, the story of the English Reformation is a story of countless letters, demands, threats, that ultimately failed to move a pope. Their failure forced Henry to look for another way, a more radical way. The true lost letter was the very idea of papal authority in England, an idea that vanished almost overnight. And here's the final, shocking realization. A global church that had stood for over a millennium was broken in England. An empire was forged. A new world order began to take shape. And it all happened because one king was desperate for a son and one woman refused to be just a mistress. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the largest shifts in history turn on the smallest, most human of desires. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to like and subscribe for more dives into the moments that made us who we are. See you next time.